What if events went differently in Marvel's Spider-Man? What if Black Cat did have a child during the City That Never Sleeps DLC? What if it was true and she wasn't tricking Peter Parker? Welcome back, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, to the highly anticipated What If episode. This is probably the most highly anticipated episode right now on the channel. Ever since I revealed it all those months ago, it went through rewrite after rewrite to really trying to cement this as a really good What If video. And I do want to apologize for everybody that this did take a while, but again, all the work here does take a long time to get out, so to have this finally rolling out to you guys, it's finally here. I can't wait. Again, I do want to say thank you so much for your patience. Do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content on this channel. There's going to be so many videos, and I do want to put the challenge out to you guys. Make sure you watch the entire video because there's going to be a new series coming out that will have to do with a lot of shoutouts. It's going to be a breakdown series where we're going to be breaking down a lot of these videos and we're going to be answering questions and answers. So if you have questions about why did the story take this direction, what could have been done differently, what you liked, what you didn't like, make sure you let me know because I will be having your comments in the video. So if you want to be featured, literally just send me a message in the comments. Just do it in the comments. Don't DM me, just send it in the comments. But that being said, my fellow watchers, let's dive into the highly anticipated Marvel's What If video. Peter was transfixed. The tides were turning upon him. Life no longer felt good. He knew he was losing grip. He found it difficult to reconnect with reality. There standing before him, the lady he had loved with all his existence had become a terrible monster and had allied with his enemies. How did she get to this point? What happened to Mary Jane Watson? Where did it all go wrong? Peter's head buzzed with several unanswered questions. But at the moment, he had no time to seek answers. A sudden gust of wind separated both of them. Peter had one good look at the scene. Half of the city had been destroyed. People wailed and ran in several directions, all in a bid to escape the danger looming above them. Cars collided, ambulances carried more than it should. All the city hospitals needed more beds that evening. People knew he should have saved them, but first, he needed to get rid of the monster inside of Mary Jane. A web shot from MJ, and it shot Peter back into reality. The shot blackened out half of his face. How did she? He pulled it off and took one good look at it. The Venom symbiote, Peter cursed. How was this possible? He wondered how MJ got to know about the symbiote and how she became a host to it. In the distance, Otto Octavius was quickly approaching. Peter looked at MJ's eyes. The darkness he saw almost blinded him. He began to recall what led to the present moment, to what made the beast out of Mary Jane. It all began with a simple delivery from a bike guy on a cold winter's evening. Location: Peter's home. Peter was away from home fighting crime, as he did every evening. MJ remained home as she always did. The record she was playing over the speakers had stopped briefly. She had to change it to something more modern. Peter had always loved old music, and she had always reminded him to update his record archives, but Peter never took it seriously. MJ smiled as she replaced the record with something better. There was a light tap on the door. It was faint before, but when she heard it again, she wondered who it could have been. Peter, she was sure. never came into the house through the door. He was Spider-Man. When the knocking became more intense, MJ opened the door, hoping to see one of Peter's college friends, or Aunt May returning from the mall. Instead, stood a dark, skinny bike guy who owned a rickety bicycle that told of years of misuse and torture. When the bike guy asked for Peter, Mary Jane told him that he was his girlfriend. The bike guy then handed her a paper box, as he placed a small notebook on the box and asked her to sign. MJ closed the door behind her as she carried the somewhat light box into the house. She examined it carefully, strapped it to its side with a little note which appeared to have been written by a lady. It said tersely, "Sorry, Peter." MJ was curious. Wild thoughts invaded her mind. As much as she was confused, she didn't believe Peter was seeing another girl. She should have kept the box until Peter returned that cool evening, but her curiosity got the better part of Mary Jane. MJ tore the box open. Peter swung his webs as fast as he could. Aunt May's call had come in a little bit early. When he was almost catching up with the Sandman, he could not avoid Aunt May's call. Not for anything in the world. She was all he had. The busy streets took no notice of Spider-Man. Down below, there was a peace in the city, and Peter loved it. Often, he had always been pulled away from Mary Jane in emergencies, and she never complained. Mary Jane was in love with Spider-Man, and it was very mutual, so she understood. A sharp turn to the left, and Peter could see his block a few swings away. He never went through the door in his suit. That would cause a serious chaos, as everyone who would see him would automatically know who the Spider-Man was. He always used a window, which would put him inside his room. But tonight, Mary Jane was sitting by the window, looking lost and sad. She didn't hear Peter drop on the roof and slowly descend to the jutting window. Still, all she felt was a gentle wave of air by her ear, the calm voice of Peter. She looked up at Peter, and he could see the sadness in her voice and eyes. Something was wrong, but Peter could not decipher what it was. Instead, she recoiled and held her knees to support her chin. Peter had never seen Mary Jane like this before. Her mask was off when he asked her what the matter was. MJ simply asked him to change his dress before someone took a photo of him and spread it on print and social media. Within seconds, Peter was back. MJ stared at the setting winter sun. It was lame and gloomy, just as she was. She told Peter a delivery had come in that evening. She pointed to him an open box without a marking or a sender's name, but a simple address, Peter Parker, and a small note without me, which read, "I'm sorry, Peter, you deserved to know." Peter looked through the box as carefully as he could, looking one by one at the photos of a little male kid. Surprisingly, the resemblance to Peter was striking. MJ slowly lifted a photo she had dropped on the floor after long hours of staring at it. It was a photo of a lady whom she didn't recognize, but she knew Peter should have surely recognized her. She didn't say a word. The photo was thrusted at Peter's face. He looked closely at once. He recognized what the delivery meant. The lady in the photo was the Black Cat. Black Cat. Peter's eyes seemed to search the photo quickly for any sights of a landmark. All the photo gave him was the picture of a park. Nothing more. He knew Black Cat would never return. She had disappeared a few years ago. Another photo of Black Cat holding a baby was thrusted at Peter. A name was scribbled by the edge of the old-looking photo. Peter Jr., it said. Peter could not believe his eyes. He searched the box frantically, seeking an explanation to the enigma. A small envelope cuddled in MJ's hand. The winter breeze seemed to sting Peter now, like the time he was stung by the mutant spider. He had MJ to face. If what he feared turned out to be true, he had always feared Black Cat's return. Peter gently collected the envelope from Mary Jane. She didn't hesitate to give it to him. The envelope was already opened. That meant one thing for sure. Mary Jane had already read its contents. The little note in the envelope was tears, but explained everything Peter wanted to know. Peter had a son, who was currently in the care of Clara, Black Cat's friend. Felicia said that she was on her deathbed, but before she died, she wanted Peter to know the truth. The name of her son was Peter, and if Spider-Man wasn't in sheer shock and his emotions in chaos, he actually smiled at that. MJ seethed in anger and annoyance. Peter had kept such a thing away from her. How could he? This was the most shocking news she had ever received. Many thoughts ran through her mind. Peter was in a fix. Could this be one of Black Cat's many schemes to distract him? Probably not. The boy in the photo was his exact replica. No denying. And Peter suddenly recalled the night of the 23rd clearly. However, what he could not understand was how she could keep something like that away from him. MJ started to get up from the ledge. Peter tried to explain everything to her. Probably it was Black Cat's scheme to distract them and cause mischief in the city. However, Mary Jane had enough of this. She was leaving. That night, Peter could not sleep. Location: hospital. The next morning, Peter began his search for Felicia. He called the hospital where she stated in the letter and was getting some good news. The young man on the end of the other bed ran a quick check through the hospital entries. There was a name, Felicia, but no surnames. Without saying a word, Peter dropped the phone, drowned his coffee, and left his apartment. He stopped over at Mr. Winston's church in hopes of seeing Mary Jane, but she was nowhere to be found. He knew that she was hurt, and that hurt him. Felicia Hardy wasn't easy to find, but he had found her. Peter knocked on the hospital's ward door, and he opened it before he was told to. He had been told that number by the male nurse. Inside the room was an old lady who seemed to be in her 60s, who stared at Peter menacingly. On the bed opposite him was a young lady who seemed to have a life-threatening health condition. Peter wasn't surprised. He had been forewarned by the letters that she had sent. It said, deathbed. Peter moved closer to take a better look. The lady on the bed spurted with a hard cough and wheezed uncomfortably. He recognized her immediately. Not much had changed with her. Still looking like the same short blonde hair and pinch white face, but this time the face was much whiter. She looked like a ghost. She looked at her visitor and wheezed in an attempt to open up and speak. Peter had to hush her. The old lady had left the room briefly. Peter guessed that she was the Clara the letter had described. Felicia Hardy had become a shadow of her former self. She told Peter that she had been diagnosed of lung cancer and had sought all forms of medical aid, all to no good. She was dying now. Her life was embedding away, right before her eyes. Peter asked about her life after she had left. She smiled as she narrated in a tiny voice how she had led a life of crime, robbed and murdered, but was later confronted by the Taskmaster, who left a permanent scar on her back with an explosive device. She was left for dead on the untamed streets, and was later found by Clara, who took her. With Clara, she realized that she was pregnant, and knew it was Peter's. After the birth of the boy, she decided to live an honest life, but lung cancer struck. Clara soon walked into the room with a little boy. Peter needed no more telling. It was his son. This could not have been a coincidence. The little boy wore a confused smile, but Clara's stern look didn't change. Peter's head buzzed with thoughts. The noise began to grow faint in his ears. Spider-Man was now a father. How would things turn out for him now? MJ was gone now, but he probably couldn't forgive himself in return. But in the meantime, he was alone in this. He was still in his thoughts when the little boy held his hand gently. "I'm Peter," the little boy said, looking pleased. Peter couldn't only nod at him. He had to take the boy. Felicia would not survive. That was certain. He was the only family the boy had. As he left the hospital with the little boy, a figure who had been stalking Peter since the previous day stood by the window above and observed. Now things are looking bright for him, he thought, with a widened smile as he sipped something from his plastic cup. Location: MJ's family store. It had been days and Peter had not called, but he didn't come looking for her. MJ stared at the New York Daily Magazine. There was a story about Spider-Man catching the city's most wanted burglar. MJ was not surprised. She had almost forgotten about Peter after 2 weeks without seeing him. Her father told her once that he had come back looking for her and asked her to call him. Mary Jane did not bother. Something within the pages of the story amazed her. The Spider-Man was like any other human being, however, with superpowers. The article read. This caught her attention. She was well aware how Peter got his powers. Oscorp was the place, he said. He encountered the mutant spider. MJ's mind raced. What if she could get inside Oscorp? What if she could gain entrance into the lab where the spider was kept? If she killed it, would Peter still be the Spider-Man? Would he still have his powers? But what if she made the spider bite her? Would she gain super abilities? Her train of thoughts were interrupted by a young woman, by a young man who seemed to be a reporter. She could tell because he had a tag on his neck, which read, "Press." The young man looked arrogant and sophisticated, and she could tell he was good at his job just by looking at him. He asked MJ for a can of Coke. MJ seemed to not hear. She was mesmerized at the reporter's aurora. He banged the table lightly and asked her again. MJ quickly apologized for her and gave him what he asked for. He took a gulp and sat on the chair across from MJ at the bar. He nodded at the copy of the magazine, which she had carelessly flung away. He inquired if she was a fan of the company, and MJ nodded while she continued cleaning the table. He smiled and began to talk about the Spider-Man story. He spoke at lengths, and he hoped he could know who the Spider-Man really was. MJ smiled at him. By the time he finished his drink, MJ had discarded her notion of him as arrogant. She realized he could help her gain access into the labs at Oscorp. She only needed to convince him that she knew what gave Spider-Man his powers, and could show him if he would. She knew he would accept without hesitation. He told her his name was Eddie Brock, as he paid for his drink and left. He had dropped a contract card. MJ picked it up after he had left and studied it. It was a reporter for the New York Daily Magazine, the paper she had been reading. She quickly grabbed the magazine and flipped the pages to where she had seen the Spider-Man story. The reporter was the same Eddie Brock. Now she understood why he spoke about Spider-Man with so much passion. She at once realized that Eddie would do anything to unravel the mystery of the spider. She smiled at the knowledge of this. Location: Oscorp building. Mary Jane had gone over for a business meeting with Eddie about Spider-Man, and she convinced him to follow her to Oscorp. Mary Jane told Eddie almost everything, but she left out the true identity of Spider-Man. Eddie was so impressed and obliged to go with her immediately. Oscorp was a huge building with several service elevators and stairs. Harry Osborn, founder of Oscorp, was deathly ill. The news had said it, that his scientists had been searching for a cure for his medical deficiencies for several months. They had all failed now. Harry was at the brink of death. Eddie Brock had arrived an hour later and apologized to MJ for being behind schedule. MJ didn't mind, so long as she was going to know the truth behind the mutant spider that had bitten Peter a few years ago. MJ had no other intentions that Eddie Brock didn't know about. He had come alone with just a little camera. She recalled that she had been with Peter to Oscorp, and he had shown her where the mutant spider was held. Nobody but two of them knew the actual powers of the spider. She wanted the spider for herself. It was the only way she could get revenge on Peter for what he did to her. Eddie and MJ had slipped away from the group of people who had joined them on a tour. Eddie had his camera well planted in his pocket. MJ could remember the place better now. The intricate patterns of the stairs and labs came rushing back into her memory, as if it was by some injection. Quickly, both of them navigated the corridors of Oscorp, avoiding the circuit cameras as much as they could. When they got to a junction of corridors, they stopped. She seemed to forget now. Eddie became hesitant. He asked her if she recalled the way to the lab. MJ didn't respond. Suddenly, a strange voice only she heard in her head asked her to take a left. Without alerting Eddie, she took it, rushed to the first floor, opened, and flew inside with Eddie close behind her. They managed to slam the door shut before two security personnel, who happened to be on patrol holding cups of coffee, passed by without paying attention. They were in the right lab. Eddie sighed with relief. MJ searched carefully for the mutant spider. There were cases of transparent glasses on shelves and tables, and computers. Eddie went to a computer and booted it up. Mary Jane asked him why he needed a computer. Eddie simply smiled and told her he used to work as a database manager for a company before he became a reporter. Eddie quickly searched the lab's directory for the spider. Shelf 12, floor 3, he said out loud to Mary Jane. She quickly scanned the shelves for numbers. She found it. Locating it wasn't difficult at all. Carefully, she set down the glass. The spider laid there motionless and undisturbed. By the rouse MJ might have caused it, filled with awe, Eddie pulled out his camera and began taking photos of the spider. He was getting close to unraveling who the Spider-Man was. His search was finally coming to an end. He was grateful to Mary Jane for it. MJ stared at the spider. It wasn't what she expected to see. She was actually quite disappointed. How could a spider as small as this carry so many abilities on Peter? Now, she couldn't achieve her aim of removing the spider from the case because it was properly sealed and lined with burglar-proof technology. She sighed as she removed her backpack from the table and put it on. As she did this, Mary Jane made to shake his hand away and accidentally hit the glass, sending it crashing onto the floor. The burglar alarm sounded. Both of them knew the guards would be on their way within a few seconds, battling to clean up their traces and hide before the guards got to them. Both did not pay attention to the spider, which had escaped. MJ's heart raced loudly in her chest, threatening to blow up. They quickly entered a cupboard to hide as the guards came in. The cupboard they were in, confined, was barely enough to hold one person comfortably. Eddie held his breath. MJ was going to faint if these guards did not leave anytime soon. They listened instantly. The guards had rearranged the place but did not discover them. Eddie signed when they eventually left the lab. Both of them climbed out of their hiding place. Eddie was cross with MJ, who almost blown their cover. Mary Jane apologized to him and promised that she would do anything he wanted to do. Eddie stated that it was okay, as long as she would agree to feature in an interview he had arranged during the day. Without MJ's story, the Spider-Man story counted for nothing. MJ suddenly remembered the spider. It had escaped its hold. Eddie began to look for it frantically. The spider was gone. They searched the cupboards around the broken glass. The spider was nowhere to be found. MJ was in a panic. The spider was dangerous and could not be allowed to go free. She quickly scanned the floors, and suddenly, to Eddie's surprise, he discovered that the spider was stuck slightly to MJ's collar. Before he could say a word, it stung MJ so hard that she yelped in pain. She felt her head swell more than she could ever imagine. Her pulse raced. Eddie's voice, asking her if she was okay, was beginning to go faint in her head. MJ was collapsing. The spider had bit her. She felt like she was going to die. What if the spider's venom was too strong for her to keep? She had not planned things to go this way. She fell slowly to the floor, and the last thing she saw was Eddie trying to break her fall. Then she blacked out. Location: Peter's home. Peter knew something was not right. First of all, he had not seen MJ in days. She hadn't been at her father's. He could not reach her on the phone, and wherever he could, a young man by the name of Eddie always got the phone. He tried to recall anyone named Eddie Brock, but eventually gave up as he had no idea. Secondly, he was finding it quite difficult, combining his fatherly duties with these duties of being the protector of the city. The lab where the spider had been held had been broken into, and the spider was lost. He feared MJ's involvement in this. Finally, there was this figure always following him around. Twice, he had tried to ambush this unknown stalker, but he had failed. The figure seemed to be following and reading his every move. Peter had taken a quiet stroll to MJ's. As he went, he realized how long it had been since he had last saw her. He knew that she was still very angry with him, but none of these had been his fault. He didn't cheat on her. He didn't do anything wrong. He was as surprised as she was to learn about this. He feared his enemies might take advantage of the situation. Peter was greeted by a closed shop. He was at the loss. Things were beginning to look bad for him. It had been days since Mary Jane had been bitten by the spider. She didn't know what she felt when she woke up, and she found herself in Eddie's apartment. That night, she had realized some strange things happened to her, like being extremely sensitive to the sound and danger. Peter had discovered where she was. He had stalked the phone number, and the address was at a building that was not very far from where he lived. Eddie didn't see him. One cool evening, sitting on the roof on the opposite building, watching the two of them sitting together, Peter had to investigate Eddie and discovered that he was a reporter who was bent on exposing his identity. He feared Mary Jane must have led him to the lab. Donning his mask, he swung away. MJ had begun to grow too close to Eddie. She almost followed him everywhere he went. She had no choice. Abandoned by the one person she fell in love with, feeling rejected and cheated on, MJ had decided that Eddie wasn't a bad deal after all. He had powerful friends who could influence anything if he would just ask them to. Recently, she had heard him talking about a symbiote, which lay in a lab close to the sea. But the lab was heavily guarded, and it wasn't very easy to gain access unless a staff member helped you. For much of what she knew, Eddie was seeing a particular lady who worked at the lab, who was willing to expose the secret experiments in the laboratory, carried out on human hosts, with an alien symbiote that would kill them immediately after. That fateful evening, she had been in the car with Eddie when the lab got in the front seat, telling Eddie how to gain access to the laboratory, when and how. Mary Jane was curious about this particular lab, so far that she did not use her new powers for fear of getting Eddie to mistrust her. She had managed to keep it hidden, even when she could still feel the tingle whenever the danger was close by. The lady claimed that the symbiote had never been seen before. She gave Eddie an access key that would open the automatic doors, and a map of the lab. MJ took mental notes as she then asked to be excused because she had to go outside and think. Once Mary Jane was outside, she started venting literally because of the conflicting feelings inside of her. MJ wanted to be a superhero just like Peter and was jealous, but anytime she tried to use her powers in that path, Peter's face showed up in her mind, and she remembered what he did to her. Because of this, Mary Jane was driven by a powerful force of revenge. She figured that if this unknown symbiote could be harnessed by her, then she could be superior to Peter and make him feel the same amount of sadness and pain he had put her through. Location: the secret lab. In the hidden laboratory off the coast of the city, the lady told the truth. The lab was heavily protected from the intruders. MJ circled the fence a few times before she finally decided to use her new powers to get in. So, without much effort, she swung over the fence and landed with a heavy thud on the floor. So far, she had not been detected by anybody. The watchtowers of the laboratory grounds had lights pointed at every nook and cranny. MJ stuck close to the fences, avoiding the circuit cameras. Twice, she had the tingle and hid immediately. Twice, she had almost been discovered. The lab was heavily secured. Mary Jane then felt her jean pockets for the passkey the lady had given to Eddie, which she stole that evening without his knowledge. The past weeks had been them seemingly really close, and Mary Jane was sure Eddie was beginning to love her. She had almost forgotten about Peter. The only thing she felt for him was rage and resentment. MJ quickly made her way to the elevator. After a lot of close calls and used the passkey, she prayed that it would work, and it did. Once she got inside the lab where the symbiote was stored, she felt a lot of emotions. Mary Jane felt fear, awe, and curiosity. The symbiote, which was a black goo, was consistently swirling. MJ approached it with caution, and it rose to meet her. Before she could even decide on how to carry it out of the laboratory, she was surrounded by the security guards, and they told her not to touch it, as it was the property of Norman Osborn, and they began to open fire on her. Due to her super speed and reflexes, accompanied by her spider senses, Mary Jane dodged all of the bullets. However, the glass containing the symbiote did not, and before MJ knew, it pounced on her and everything went dark. Location: Peter's house. Peter stared at the TV in awe. He wondered how such a secure lab could be vulnerable to theft. The reporter on the TV was saying that the only missing item was an alien symbiote, which the lab scientists, such as Dr. Connors, had retrieved from a spaceship crash site somewhere in Bulgaria a year ago. Peter knew he had to investigate why this happened. The whole city was in danger if he didn't. The footage, which was retrieved from the body armor of the security personnel, showed a lady-like figure in the darkness of the corridors, throwing web shots and causing havoc. This implemented Peter. He gasped at the realization. Now at least he knew what he was up against. Location: Peter's home. The news had it that the weather conditions would be harsh upon the city. that they would be getting a snowstorm soon, and that it was raging since the previous week. And soon Peter would be the city's patrol. The robbery of the lab off of the city's coast still remained unsolved by him. He flipped through the little diary. Today, he would search the inner depths of the city for any traces of a lady who shot webs like he did. But within a fast, remarkable pace, little Peter had been adjusting well. It had been months since Felicia died, and the boy had gotten over it. That fateful morning, little Peter was not in school, and he had to ensure that the boy was fed before he left. There were shouts outside the streets, and Peter rushed outside to see what was going on. There his eyes met. He met with the most awful sight. Ladylike, or traces of possession of an alien superpower, was a lady he knew too well. Mary Jane was displaying more than what Peter could fathom. Sometimes she would be spider-like, other times she would be alien-like, other times just MJ. Racing across the room, Peter had ensured that his son was safely outside the building with Aunt May, before going into his closet to select his strongest suit, the Iron Spider suit. He would have to fight Mary Jane, and he hoped that he could set her free from whatever it was that she got herself into. Running to the window fully dressed, Spider-Man jumped and dived into the air before swinging away towards Mary Jane. Reporters and policemen were beginning to arrive at the scene. MJ had begun to destroy most of the public property. As Peter got close enough to her, he gasped. MJ was being mind-controlled by Mr. Negative, one of Peter's worst nightmares. How did she get herself into all of this? He wondered as he stopped short. Doc Ock was spotted by Peter. He had made a few very permanent changes to his body, like 5 robot tentacles attached to his back. Did he have all of them along? Or did he just acquire them? Either way, Peter was shocked to see that Otto Octavius had been behind Devil's Breath. He couldn't believe everything that had transpired. Peter had to stop everybody, and the only way he was going to was to unmask and speak to MJ. He had to get through to her. He hoped that he could calm her down, so he leaped off the building and landed on the street road. This was it. The whole city held its breath. He called out to her. The media was already all over the place, taking photos and waiting for the moment when Peter would unmask. MJ's rage boiled when she saw him. She lashed out and threw at him, but he dodged everything she threw at him. He didn't move an inch. Doc Ock laughed at him and revealed everything to him. He stated that since he had been working with Mary Jane ever since, they had tricked her into getting a cure for Harry's sickness through the symbiote. But after bonding with it, her mind state had become weakened. This then made her vulnerable to the mind control of Mr. Negative. Peter's rage quickly increased, and he got so mad. Just as he was about to unleash his rage, Mr. Negative with his army of demons appeared at the scene. "This is the part where you all will run," he said with a maniacal laugh. Before Peter knew it, there was massive chaos. People who had succumbed to his mind control powers begun to run to nowhere in particular, injuring themselves and others at the same time. In that very moment, Mary Jane launched at Peter, grabbing him by the suit and hitting him fiercely on the nearest wall. It almost became a fist fight. The Venom symbiote had enhanced her already, enhanced her strength and speed, and Peter was no match for her. He didn't even recover when she grabbed him again and threw him up on the wall off of a tall building. Peter tried to block what was coming out, but the Venom symbiote persisted and hit Peter multiple times and did damage his suit. "We will destroy you," she said in rage. Peter managed to get on his feet this time and tried to tie her up with his webs, but MJ evaded all. Now, as he stood, he hated himself for the sudden turn of events. He had to save MJ from herself, and Doc Ock was approaching in the distance, and Mr. Negative was busy mind-controlling the rest of the population, putting them in a state of constant fear of the unknown. Peter noticed that Eddie Brock was among the citizens being controlled, and it enraged him that the journalist risked his life just to save Mary Jane. His MJ, before Peter knew it, Ock reached the scene. He then asked Mary Jane to kill Peter and end her suffering. After much thought, MJ threw a web shot at Peter, holding him bound. Ock's tentacles pursued Peter's face, drawing back the iron mask. Parker was bleeding at the nose and mouth. Ock looked at him intensely. "Dear boy," he said, "your father would be proud of you, son," he said with a sinister smile as he nodded at MJ to finish him off. However, at that moment, something interesting happened. He was not truly under Mr. Negative's mind control. He was simply acting in order to get close to him. Once he did, he struck Mr. Negative with an uppercut, and because of this, Martin Lee's mind control had temporarily worn off of Mary Jane. She suddenly realized what she had been doing. Ock saw that she was now in her right sense of mind, and decided to finish the job by himself. Mary Jane saw that he wanted to kill a helpless Spider-Man, as he lifted his tentacles and pointed it at his heart. She looked at him, and his eyes seemed to tell her he was sorry for everything that had happened, and that he was already willing to die. MJ battled with conflicting thoughts. She held her head and screamed. The Venom symbiote came rushing into her mind again, but she acted fast. With a defining moment, she pushed Doc off of the building and saved Peter. But he used one of his robot tentacles to drag her down along with him. Peter tried to catch her, but he could not. When Ock hit the ground, it caused an explosion that completely destroyed the Venom symbiote. Peter immediately jumped down and was relieved to find that Mary Jane was still alive. The symbiote, in its last effort, had kept her safe from the blast. With teary eyes, Peter vowed to stop the duo of Mr. Negative and Doc Ock. So getting up and lifting MJ with him, he descended to the ground and left her with Aunt May as he went to pursue Mr. Negative. Due to Mary Jane's efforts, Doc Ock was already unconscious. Spider-Man went on to battle Mr. Negative, and he successfully defeated him. He even gave him a pat on the back for his bravery. When the sun rose in the morning, Mary Jane had regained her consciousness. She cried profusely when she realized what she had done and the damage that she had caused. Mary Jane then swore to use her powers for good and work something out with Peter and Peter's son, because even though she wanted to deny it, she still loved him. And that is going to be What If Black Cat Had a Kid in Marvel's Spider-Man. Although I didn't indirectly use the City That Never Sleeps storyline, I really wanted to dive into this universe, as I think it's very unique to see Peter having a son. It's like, what would happen? What's going to happen now? Is Harry going to die? What's going to happen with Miles? What's going to happen to the Sinister Six? Maybe even Kraven, as a lot of the events from both video games happen at the same time. So it's a very interesting what if. I really enjoyed doing this one. It's incredible to see so many people supporting the channel and really, requesting things and really giving their insight on things and wanting content. Again, I do really want to apologize for not having this video out when I did. I ended up doing a lot of reveals in 2023, depending on when you're watching this, and I do want to say that this video was one of them that did get revealed. But unfortunately, with school and everything happening all at at once, I wasn't able to fully get this out. So again, I do want to say I do apologize for not having it out earlier, but again, what did you think of this Marvel's What If video? And I do want to say we're going to be getting into the Marvel's Spider-Man 2 What Ifs, as you know, time has passed since the video game has released, and I can't wait to get into those. I did tease out what if Spider-Man kept the symbiote in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, as well as what if Harry Osborn did get cured from the symbiote. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens on the channel. There's so much content coming out. You know, we have brand new series. Again, I do want to say, make sure to join the conversation on the storyline. Let me know what you liked about the storyline, what could have changed, what you thought I could have done differently, as I will be featuring comments in the latest breakdown videos. But again, thank you so much for tuning in. Subscribe, like, share, and turn those notifications on so you and your friends are up to date with the latest content. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and have a fantastic day. Peace out.